Ever feel like you're running on fumes? Like you're just completely spent? We're doing a deep dive on burnout today. You know, really going beyond just feeling stressed to figure out what's really going on. And more importantly, how to actually break free.
And it seems like you're ready to ditch the quick fixes and get serious about this because you handed us a mountain of articles and research.
So how is burnout different from just having a rough week? The stuff we've been looking at seems to say it's a whole other thing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Burnout, it's not just being tired. It's like this chronic state of just being depleted. And it really gets into how we think and feel, even how we see ourselves. One of the things we read said it's more of a slow burn, not a sudden thing.
So how do we know if it's actually burnout or just, life? What are the signs?
That's the thing about burnout. It can be sneaky. But there are 3 core symptoms that kept popping up. First, emotional exhaustion. You're probably familiar with that one, that feeling of being just totally wiped out.
Yeah, for sure. But then it gets a little trippy. One of the articles mentioned depersonalization. What does that even mean?
Right. One article told a story about a teacher who started feeling like a robot in the classroom, just going through the motions, no connection to the students or the joy of teaching. And that's kind of what it is, this feeling of being detached, feeling cynical, like you're watching yourself from outside.
Wow. Okay, so you're emotionally spent, you're feeling detached. What's the third warning sign?
Reduced sense of accomplishment. So you're putting in the work, but it's like nothing is good enough, You're constantly feeling like you're falling short, even when you're succeeding. And all the research agreed this can really mess with your motivation and just create a nasty cycle.
So it's like this perfect storm: exhaustion, cynicism, and feeling completely ineffective. No wonder people feel stuck. Okay, so knowing the enemy is one thing, but how do we actually stop this burnout train before it leaves the station? You can't just, tell it to take a hike, right?
You're right. There's no magic get out of burnout free card. But one thing that really stood out from what we read is how much everyone focused on prevention. Burnout isn't like a guarantee. It's more about building habits that keep us going.
So like preventative maintenance.
Exactly. And a big part of that, like a huge E part, according to these sources, is boundaries.
Okay, preach. Boundaries, especially around work, because that tends to bleed into everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not just saying no to more work. One article called it creating white space, which I love. It's about actually putting you on the schedule.
White space. I like that. Like room to breathe.
Exactly. It's where those smaller habits come in. We saw a lot about taking short walks during the day. Even 5 minutes to move around can totally shift your focus.
Oh, for sure. So easy, yet so easy to forget. What about meditation? That's got to be on the list.
It was, but here's a twist. One researcher actually suggested micro-meditations throughout the day instead of one big session.
Ooh, that's interesting. Like a quick reset button when you're getting overwhelmed?
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Food. Fueling your body well. It's crazy how often we grab junk when we're stressed, and that just messes with our energy even more.
The irony, right?
Yeah.
Trying to power through burnout, but fueling ourselves like we're about to stall out.
Totally. And of course, then there's sleep.
Don't even get me started. Sleep is like the holy grail, but the first thing to go when things get crazy.
Right. One source said trying to tackle burnout without sleep is like running a marathon with a flat tire. You'll move, but not very well, and definitely not far.
Too real. Okay, so prioritizing sleep, setting boundaries, those little moments of self-care, this is feeling doable, which I appreciate because burnout is usually overwhelming enough. But what about when it's too late for prevention? Like, we're already there, stuck in the burnout pit. Is there any hope of climbing out? So we've talked about how to prevent burnout, which is great. But what happens when it's too late? Like, what if we're already, up to our eyeballs in burnout? Is it even possible to come back from that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. One of the most reassuring things we saw, like across the board in the research, is that burnout is reversible. It's not a life sentence or anything. It's more like a signal to switch gears, to hit reset.
That is reassuring because burnout can be so isolating. It's easy to feel like you're the only one who can't handle it.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to acknowledge it when it's happening. One therapist put it perfectly. Trying to power through burnout is like trying to outrun a tsunami. It's going to catch you eventually.
Okay, yeah, that's a scary but accurate image. So acknowledging it is step one. Then what? We saw a lot about taking time off, but how is that even possible when you're already drowning in work?
I know, right? It seems impossible. But you have to think about it like an investment, not a luxury. One source compared burnout to a burnt-out light bulb, and time off is like letting it cool down before you try to fix it.
I'm with you so far. So we cool down, we let the burnout settle. What then?
Then it's all about reconnecting with yourself, with those things that light you up. You know, that hobby you loved but haven't made time for, or maybe that friend you've been meaning to call. Recovery means letting yourself experience joy again.
You can't pour from an empty cup. But how do we even start to refill it when we feel this burnt out?
It's tough, no doubt. A lot of the sources also talked about getting professional help. A therapist can give you the tools and support you need to process all those burnout emotions, which can be a lot.
Because it's not just about, meetings or deadlines. Burnout goes deeper than that.
Definitely. And as you start to recover, you might realize some things just have to change. Maybe it's your work, your boundaries, even just your perspective. It's a process of figuring out what matters and building a life that reflects that.
So less of a quick fix, more of a life adjustment.
Yeah, and that brings up another important point. How do we stop this whole burnout cycle from just happening over and over?
Okay, yeah. How do we stop it from becoming the norm?
Resilience. That was huge in the research. Building up that inner strength to weather the tough stuff without completely falling apart.
So like building up our mental immune system.
Yes, and it starts with those little habits we were talking about.
Yeah.
Sleep, boundaries, good food, breaks. It's about showing up for ourselves even when it's hard.
So if someone's listening to this, feeling inspired to make a change, to actually thrive, not just survive, what's one small thing they can do today to start building that resilience?
Honestly, I think it's about finding just one thing that brings you joy, no matter how small, and making time for it. Could be reading a book, going for a walk, calling a friend, just remembering that you are worthy of joy, of rest, of a life that feels good.
I love that. Burnout doesn't have to define us. It's more like a wake-up call. It's a chance to rebuild a life we actually love.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this deep dive, what spark are you ready to reignite?